Hey guys, welcome back. This is the 12th of my Java video tutorial series, and in this video you will learn the concept of Java objects. Also, I will teach you how to declare instance variables, and also I will tell you how to use the access modifier private. And in this video I will teach you how to initialize the instance variables using the constructor, and also in this video, included in this video, I'm gonna explain how to access those instance variables using Accessor and Mutator methods. And last but not least, I will explain how to use toString method to return the string representation of an object. So all these in one video. So we better start. Okay, let's talk about a simple object. Any object that can be found in this world. So I have an example here, which is the ball, a soccer ball. Now, any ball or soccer ball has two things, okay? And these are attributes and behaviors. Now, what are the attributes? What are the attributes of a soccer ball? Now, a soccer ball has color, shape, texture, etc., etc. And a soccer ball behaves like, it can be kicked, it can be thrown, it can be passed, anything. Okay, a soccer ball can do so many things beside these three. But how about a Java object? Now, like a ball, like a soccer ball, Java object also has two things, these attributes and behaviors. Okay, but in Java, attributes are also known as instance variables or fields, and in Java, behaviors are also known as Java methods. So Java object and ordinary object that can be found in this world are similar. They have both attributes and behaviors. But to know more about Java objects, let's consider this scenario. Let's say, for example, a company, a construction company wants to build 10 houses. So this company would probably hire an architect to design a building. Okay? But the thing is, these 10 buildings that this construction company wants to build have the same design. All 10 buildings have the same specifications. So what would this architect would do? Will this architect create 10 blueprints for the 10 buildings with the same designs and specifications? Of course not. This architect would rather create only one blueprint for the 10 houses, for the 10 buildings, What's the point of creating 10 blueprints for the 10 buildings if these 10 buildings have the same designs, the same specifications? So just create one blueprint, and that one blueprint will be used to build these 10 buildings. Okay? Now, if we are going to connect this to Java, what does blueprint represent? What does this building represent? Okay? Now, blueprint represents the class itself. This is the Java class that the programmer writes one time. Okay? Now, these buildings represent the Java objects. This is what the programmers create multiple times, logically, virtually, even though there are 10 objects, but you won't see them. What you only see is the Java class that the programmer writes. Okay, now based on this Java class, we can come up with several objects. Now these objects are virtual. I mean, you cannot see them, right? You just, yeah, you create them, but where are they? You cannot see them. Unlike the Java class, you can see the code on the screen, on Eclipse, on NetBeans, or any other IDEs, okay? But when you create objects of that class, well, you cannot see them, but they are there. You can tell that you create 10 objects of a class. So I hope you understood this scenario, the concept of Java objects. Okay, enough of the concepts. Let's start programming then. So let's open our Eclipse or any IDs you have. Now let's create a class called student. Okay. Now every student has attributes. Okay. What are the attributes, common attributes of a student? Our student has badge number, right? And badge number could be of data type integer or a string. So let me declare my attribute or instance variable badge as integer. Okay, so let me call it badge, but I'm going to declare it private because I want to protect it. Now, protect, you might ask me, what does it mean by protect? Okay, later I'm going to show you. But in the meantime, let me just declare all my instance variables private. Okay, now let's have one more instance variable. Let's have another attribute of a student. Of course, student has a name. Okay, and one last thing, let's have another attribute or instance variable of a student. Let's have GPA. Okay, so now I have 3 instance variables declared as private, and now I have 3 attributes such as badge, name, and GPA. Now the thing is, if you don't initialize badge, the default value is 0. If you don't initialize explicitly the name, it's by default it's null, N-U-L-L, because it's of type non-primitive. And if you don't explicitly initialize GPA, by default it is initialized to 0.0. And sometimes we have to initialize, we have to give values to these instance variables. So that's the job of the constructor. Now constructor is a method. Okay, it is a special method. I keep saying constructor is a special method because it doesn't have return data type. Okay, it's not void, it doesn't return int, it doesn't return double, nothing. It doesn't return. Okay, so after writing the access modifier public, and then you write the name of the constructor, you write the name of the method, and the name of the method must be the same as the name of the class. That's why I keep saying that constructor is a special method, because of these reasons. Okay, so what's the name of the class? Student. So the name of this method, the name of this constructor must also be the student. Okay, so again, constructor doesn't have return data type, and the name of this method must be the same as the name of the class. So again, this is what we call the constructor. Now constructor is used to initialize these instance variables, to give these instance variables the values, okay, they're supposed to have. Now, so since student constructor, constructor is supposed to assign values to badge, to name, and to GPA. So it has to accept, okay? Because if it doesn't accept, where would this constructor get the values to assign to these three instance variables, right? So again, constructor must have three parameters as well. Okay, so let me call B for the badge, let me call N for the name, and let me call G for the GPA. So whatever the values of B, N, and G, they must be assigned to these three instance variables. So another in the body, we're going to have three assignment operations. So badge will be initialized to B. So B is assigned to badge, and name will be initialized to N. So meaning N is assigned to name, and GPA is initialized to G. So G is assigned to GPA. So we are done with the constructor. Okay, this constructor has three parameters because we have three instance variables to initialize. Okay, again, if you don't have this, where would the constructor get the values to assign to these three instance variables? Nowhere, nothing, right? So these constructors must, this constructor needs three values to assign to badge, to name, and to GPA, to these three instance variables. Okay, so again, constructor is used to initialize the instance variables. Okay, now let's go to the main. Let's go to another class with the main method. So I have created here another class. I called it student test, and this class has, of course, the main, so that we can run our code. If main doesn't exist, of course, you will not be able to see the output of your code. So you better have your main ready all the time to see the output of your class, of your programs. Now, since these two are different classes, so the badge here cannot be accessed in the main. I mean, you know, these three are unknown to this class. So what should we do in order for these two classes to be connected? Because what I want here is I want main to access the badge, to access the name, to access the GPA. Okay, I want main to, for example, print any of the three instance variables. But in this case, as of this moment, main method cannot, because these are two different classes, right? They are strangers to one another. So what should we do in order for us to connect these two classes? Okay, what should we do in order for these two classes to become friends, so that they can use each other's attributes and behaviors? Okay, so the solution for these two classes to be connected is main must have the object of students. So in other words, we must create an object of student, and I'm sure you know how to create an object of a class. We've been creating an object of scanner class. Remember, when we want to ask the user to input, we create an object of scanner. So the same concept. So we're gonna have declaration. So I'm gonna declare a reference variable stud, and that stud is of type non-primitive. This stud reference variable is of type student, because this stud will be referring to the object of student. That's why it must be of type student. Okay, now if you still remember, the second part of this statement is called object creation itself. An object creation must start with the keyword new, followed by the object, the class that you're creating an object of. Okay, so followed by a semicolon, ended with a semicolon. But look what happened. It is underlined. Why is it underlined? You remember, guys, if you do this, the constructor of the class is called. So let's go back to the constructor. The constructor has 3 parameters. So in other words, the color, which is the main, must pass 3 values as well. So if there are 3 parameters, there must be 3 arguments here. They must be of the same order. So if you may just allow me to copy and paste over here, so I don't have to type. But the problem is, what is the value of B? What is the value of N? And what is the value of G? So you may ask the user to input the values for the badge, for the name, and for the GPA. But for the sake of, we just want to make this code as simple as possible. So let me just initialize it myself. So the first value that should be passed to the constructor is the badge. Okay, so let me just initialize it to 111. So 111 is the value that will be sent to, that will be passed to the B here, right? To the first parameter. Now the second argument, let me say stud1. So that's the name. So stud1 is assigned to N, meaning it's the value of N is stud1. So stud1 is passed to the constructor. This is the second argument, so that will be passed to the second parameter. And third, the last parameter, G. So let's say the GPA of stud1 is 3.8. So 3.8 is being passed to this parameter here, which is called G. So in other words, B has a value of 111, and N has a value of stud1, and G has a value of 3.8. So by doing this, by creating an object of student, these two classes are now connected. Main method can now access any of the 3, okay, any of the 3 attributes this student class has. Okay, but let's try it. Let's say display. I want to display in the main. I want main to access the badge of the student. Okay, I want the main method to access the badge. How can I do that? So we can allow main to access the badge by using the reference variable of that object. So we're gonna say stud dot badge. Okay, but the problem is badge is underlined, meaning to say main couldn't access badge directly. You know why? Because badge is declared as private. So in other words, by declaring our instance variable private, we can protect them. Okay, we can protect them to be we don't allow any other methods to access them abruptly or to access them directly. Okay, So it's some kind of protecting our data from unauthorized access. So that's the power of the access modifier private. No one can access the data directly. Okay, so if that's the case, how can main access the badge since it's private? Now that's where the accessor comes in. Okay, so we're gonna have the accessor. In Java, accessor methods are also known as get methods. Now, for it is much better to have one accessor method. It is better to have one get method for each instance variable. So if I have 3 instance variables, I shall have 3 accessor methods. So accessor method returns. Okay, so if I create an accessor for badge, for the badge number, it would be like this. So int get, let me call it get, since it returns badge. Okay, so it simply returns the badge. So let's go back to the main. So now, since the student class has the accessor method that returns the value of the badge, so the main, which is the caller here, would rather call the get method than accessing the private instance variable. So let's say stud.get badge. So that's the name of the method. Okay, so the underline is gone. So meaning to say, this is correct. So main calls get badge using the reference variable to the object of students, and get badge returns the badge. So since it returns, whatever the returned value will be printed in this statement. So let's try. So see, the output is 1 1 1. So meaning to say, in order for a method to access the data, the method must call the accessor, because the data are declared private. Okay, the fields, the instance variables are declared private. But if it's not declared private, if it's declared public or package, no need for the get badge to be called. You mean no need for get badge. So the caller can access it directly, like what I'm going to do now. So since badge, instance variable badge, is declared public, so any other method that has the object, that has the reference to the object of student, can access it. So in this case, the main. So since the main has the reference to the object of student, so it can access the instance variable, public instance variable badge. See, it's not underlined because badge is declared as public. So your data are vulnerable if you declare them public. You know, anybody can access it. Any methods can access them instantly, so easily. And that's not a good way. That's not, it's not a proper way of declaring your instance variables. So it is much better to declare them private, as private. Okay, so you are protecting them. So again, this statement, this calling, this access statement here is not allowed. See the underline here, because badge is again private. The main who wants to access it is not allowed to access it directly because it's private. It is protected in a way. It cannot be accessed. Your data are safe. They cannot be accessed so instantly, so easily. So they have, the caller must call the method, the accessor method. In this case, the accessor method is the get badge. and this method is the one that gets it. This method is the one that gets it, that accesses it, and returns the value to the caller. And this time the caller is the main. Okay, so I hope the concept of accessor method is clear. Now again, it is better to have one accessor method for every instance variable. Make it a habit. Okay, so I'm gonna have two more accessor methods. Okay, another one for the name. So I'm gonna call my accessor method getName, because it simply returns the name. Okay, now let me save spaces. So since I only have one line in the body, so I can simply do that. And one more accessor method for the GPA. So public, and GPA is a type double. So this method returns a value of type double. Let me call the method getGPA, and this simply returns the GPA. Okay, so I'm done with the three accessor methods, one for each instance variable. Okay, now let's say, for example, I made a mistake in the in the object creation statement. I wrote the name incorrectly. I gave the variable, the instance variable name, the wrong name. So I'm supposed to write student1, not stud1. So what am I supposed to do? Okay, so am I supposed to go back to the code and change this, or should I do this one more time? Should I create another student object with the same badge number but different name, but the same GPA? So which one is correct? Okay, should I go back to should I open the code and go back to this statement and look for, let me delete this first. Should I open this code? Should I open this class and go back to this statement here and change stud1 to student1? What if the code is too long? What if you have hundreds of classes, okay, to open? So you cannot afford, you know, to do it, because it's tedious. Or the second line, the second way that I wrote here. So instead of another way you might do is create another object of student with the same badge number and the same GPA, but since you only want to change the name, so you give a different name. Okay, so none of this is proper, none of this is appropriate. So if you want to change your data, for example, the name of your student, the name of the student, the objects, okay, there must be a method that handles the changing of the values. Okay, so there must be another method, and that method is called Mutator, from the root word mutate. Mutate means change. So there must, if the accessor is the one that gives the value to the caller, then the set method or the mutator methods are the ones who handles the revision. Okay, they are the ones being called if you want to change the data. Okay, so again, like get methods, like accessors, one mutator for one instance variable. Okay, so if I have three instance variable, I shall have three set methods or mutators, and mutators don't return values, so they are void usually, most of the time. So I'm gonna declare my method void. I'm gonna name my first mutator method as set badge, and since it is the one that changes the variable, so it must accept a value, and that value is the one that will be assigned to the badge, and that value is the new value of the instance variable badge. So again, it must have one instance variable at least, so int b, and b is the new value that will be assigned to badge. Okay, so just in case you want to change the value, the initial value of badge, call set badge and pass the value, the new value, and the new value is assigned to badge. So it's similar to the one we did in the constructor here. But again, remember, constructor is called once. Once you create an object like this, constructor is called. So, meaning to say, this will only be called once. Okay, so what if you want to change the value, the initial values of your instance variables? You cannot call the constructor of the same objects. You have to call the set method, just to change whatever you want to change. Okay, so I have still two to go. I still have two mutators to go, so I'm just gonna copy paste to make it faster. So I'm gonna name my second mutator as set name, and this accepts a one value of type string. Of course, that's the new name, so I'm just gonna copy paste. I'm sorry, what's happening? Okay, and last but not least, the mutator for the GPA. Okay, for the GPA, so let me call my mutator as set GPA. It accepts one parameter of type double. Now I just misspelled name, sorry about that. Okay, so the new value G must be assigned to GPA. Okay, so all my accessors, all my mutators are done. So again, since I only have one line in the body, so I rather do this so I can save spaces. Okay, but you may not do this. Okay, this is just my preference. Okay, so in the test, it is much better if you don't do this. Okay, for your code to be more readable. Okay, so don't do this. Okay, just for the sake of this tutorial, that's why I do that. Next, what you're gonna have next is, now let's say for example, I made a mistake in initializing the name of the class, the name of students. From stud1, I would like to change it to student1. Okay, so again, in order for the main method to access the set name, main calls it using the reference variable stud. Okay, and because stud is the reference variable that refers to the object of student, so whatever method the caller wants, okay, the caller must use the reference variable. Okay, stud dot what method to call to change the name of the students from stud1 to student1. So set name. Okay, and then since set name has one parameter of type string, so the color shall pass. The color, there must be one argument here. So let's say student1. Okay, so in other words, from stud1 it will become student1 after executing this line, this statement. So if I print, okay, before I do that, before I change the name, I want to print the name first, so we would see the changes. Okay, so after changing, I print the name again, so we would see the changes, if there were really changes. Okay, let me copy paste. I'm so sorry, just to make it faster. Okay, I hate more unnecessary spaces. Okay, let's try to run this. So if I run this, I shall see stud1 and student1. Okay, there you go. You see the output down here. So the first one is stud1 because that's the first printing here. The first line, the first printing statement is printing the return value of getName, which is stud1. But the second line, after the line after that, the set name is called and passing student1. So student1, which is an n is equal to student1, is assigned to name. So in other words, name now has a value of student1. Okay, and then after that, another printing statement, a calling of getName, and the return value is printed. So the getName returns the name, and the name is again was changed from stud1 to student1. That's why when you run it, the second printing statement prints student1, because this printing statement is done after calling of set name, after setting student's name to a new name. Okay, so our accessors and our mutators are done. Okay, now what if I want to display everything? What if I want to display everything? Do I have to do this? Stud.get badge. Okay, let me just put it back. So if I want to print everything, I just call the three get methods, right? So get badge, and again last printing statement, and then this time calling the GPA. So if I want to print all the data of their objects, so I'm gonna call the three get methods, because these three get methods return the values. Okay, so let's see. Yep, I'm able to see the three pieces of information of the student objects. Okay, or we can have another method, another special method called toString. toString is a special method because it comes from the mother of all classes. Now let's go to Java, Java. Object class Java. Okay, let's go to the API of object class. Okay, now as you can see here, this class object has a few methods here, and one of the methods here is called toString. Now toString simply returns the string representation of the object. So in other words, you can have your own toString here, so that you can return the string representation of this object. And since toString returns, see, toString returns a string, so your method must also have a return data type string. You cannot change the name. Remember, it's from another class in the libraries. Okay, so you cannot change the name of the method. Otherwise, it won't work. Now, again, toString method returns the string representation of the object. So, what am I going to what objects, what pieces of information I want this method to return? So I want to return the 3. I want this method to return the 3. So let me display first some labels, then followed by I'm going to concatenate it with the calling of the accessor. So let's say get badge, okay, and then followed by another label called name. Let me display it below, underneath the badge. So let me display the word name first, followed by the calling of the get name to return the name, and also last but not least, I want this method to return the GPA, but I want to display a label first, so it would be much clearer what these data are. Okay, so you're displaying something, so the user would understand what is really displayed. So which method to call to return the GPA? So get GPA method. Okay, so since toString is created, toString is done in the class, so the caller, which is now the main, which can, instead of calling 3 methods separately, the main can now call one method which returns these 3 pieces of information. So how to call toString? Same thing. You have to use the reference variable to the object, followed by the name of the method. Okay, as simple as that. Now I'm going to delete this one because I have a toString method now. So let's see. Shall I see the same output like this one? We shall see. Yes, see, with matching labels. Remember, I wrote some labels. toString returns. Okay, now there's another way of calling toString. Since again, it is a special method simply because it's from the mother of all classes, you can call it. The caller just calls it simply just by using the reference of the objects. So the reference of this object, student object, is stud. So just by writing stud, compiler would understand. Compiler understands that the method toString is being called. That's how special toString is. See? It's the same. So this is much better, you know. The shorter the better. So I hope this simple video tutorial would help you in so many ways. See you again next time. Bye-bye.